rise rapidly after you're lying down, you may not be fully awake yet, so that your heart rate hasn't come up, thus driving your blood pressure up, or you're dehydrated. Believe it or not, dehydration, once again, if you're lying down and get up rapidly, can lead to a rapid drop in blood pressure. And that will lead to dizziness, instability, and maybe even passing out. However, if you damage nerves that go to the heart via neuropathy or trauma, you can have similar issues. We're going to take a look at those nerves in a little while. Urinary problems as a result of autonomic neuropathy are actually more common. We see that you can have both sympathetic issues or parasympathetic issues. So you can have troubles with not being able to urinate, or troubles with not being able to prevent urination. So it can go to either extreme. I was just trying to give you a bunch of examples here. Actually, the National Institutes of Health, the NIH, has some really good stuff on autonomic neuropathies. Sexual difficulties, once again, it's not uncommon for people who have high blood pressure, chronic high blood pressure, due to chronic problems associated with diabetes, to have some forms of sexual dysfunction. In males, it's the loss of the ability to get erections or to reach orgasm. In females, typically it's loss of the ability to reach orgasm. And you know, there's a lot involved, once again, with that. You remember with sexual issues, it's a combination of both parasympathetic and sympathetic events. So that kind of makes perfectly good sense. And then difficulties with food digestion. In general, if you're talking about difficulties with food digestion, what are we talking about? Sympathetic or parasympathetic? Parasympathetic. Parasympathetic issues, yeah. It's really kind of odd and in some respects, but when we are under stress, when we have all sorts of stress issues, we see that pretty much immediately we have digestive issues. Your digestion slows down. If you're still trying to eat when you're having a sympathetic event, you can have issues with vomiting, you can have issues with diarrhea. So there are all sorts of problems. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Heartburn is kind of an interesting dilemma. If you are producing normal parasympathetic effects on the stomach, but in your lower digestive system, you're not moving food, you're producing stomach acids, but you're not moving anything. So that the stomach acids actually start to stay in the stomach for a longer period of time. You have a much more highly acidic environment. You get reflux. You have issues. Sweating abnormalities, too much or too little. Is this sympathetic, parasympathetic, or both?
Just sympathetic.
Why?
Parasympathetic has no effects.
Has no effects, that's right. This is entirely a sympathetic event. So either you're getting too much inappropriate signaling or not enough signaling. Now, this can involve a lot of different issues. This can involve temperature control or production of sweat. And then women have an even more complex issue. in that there is actually a sex-linked genetic trait where you can have tissue that doesn't have sweat glands. We see this rarely in males, it's fairly uncommon. But in males who have it, the female parent typically has patches of skin that doesn't sweat. And this is really bizarre. As I said, it's X-linked, it's on the X chromosome. And interestingly, the whole issue with sweat glands develops very early in your development. And the tissue that's going to become skin, some of them will have one of the X chromosomes active, patches will have the other X chromosome active, and as a result of that, they're expressed differently. In all of your tissue as a female, only one of your X chromosomes is active. But when it comes to the production of sweat glands, if you have the form of the gene that doesn't produce sweat glands, you actually will have patches of skin, and they can be very large patches that don't have the ability to sweat. And this can throw off body temperature. This can actually have major input. You know, we don't think about it that way. We're saying, oh, you got a patch of dry skin. And that's typically what it's seen as, a patch of dry skin. But it's due to the fact that there are no sweat glands there. So it can be really a very, very complex situation. Sluggish pupil reaction. Once again, you remember your pupils have both sympathetic and parasympathetic inputs, allowing them to dilate and constrict. So on occasion, you can have neuropathy. Interestingly, you can affect the signal to those, and we see this with drugs or with strokes. On occasion, someone will have a stroke and they will lose the pupillary reflex in one eye. And when that happens, you know that the stroke is affecting that reflex. We're going to look at what's involved with getting those signals there. And what you're going to see is it's a very complex set of innervations that get the signal there. But on occasion, so I'm assuming you all know, if you go have your eyes examined, they look at one eye at a time, and they put a light in there. And frequently, in the process of shining the light on this side, they'll look at your opposite eye. And they're learning a lot that way. What they see is, if this eye dilates or constricts to light, the other eye should also do it. Your eyes pretty continuously work in unison. And if only one side responds and the other side doesn't, there's a problem. And the problem is up here. It's in your brain. So, that's a really good diagnostic tool. Yeah?
Have you heard of with pirates putting a patch in one eye and try to have that eye be more net vision? Is that?
Yeah, this whole pirate thing. No, it's really great. It's really, your eyes accommodate to light change so quickly. I mean, think about the idea that you go see a movie during the day. Let's say you finally have a day off and you have enough money. You got like a $20 bill, you can go see a movie. And you go sit down in the movie for a while, and you come out, and the lights are blinding you. You get out in the parking lot, and there's no way you're driving for a while. Might as well, sit down, spend another $20 and get some popcorn. It drives me crazy when they try to put popcorn these days. So your eyes are really responsive. So that's an interesting idea. That's a nice idea. It's a romantic idea, and it's pretty much wrong. So yeah. So I would just, if you want better eyesight, eat more carrots. That probably is actually not too bad. A strategy, or sweet potatoes, whatever. Yeah. But on occasion, as a result of diabetes, once again, you know, this whole diabetic situation, you should all, you know, try to live a healthy lifestyle and do what's necessary to avoid becoming diabetic. People will lose their reflexes, and many times there'll be a bilateral loss. It's not just one side or the other side, but frequently both sides. So the inability to do that. And one of the first symptoms is problems at night, that you start to have, quote, night blindness. That's a good symptom. Exercise intolerance. Well, that sounds exciting. And you probably all remember this from either a human physiology class or an anatomy and physiology class. But as your heart rate changes, you have changes that go on with your breathing, so your respiratory rate changes, and they're continuously matched. As, you know, one starts to increase, the other one will start to increase in response. As one starts to decrease, the other will start to decrease. And it's really kind of interesting the way that all works. That's not a correlation of the nervous system. That's a correlation of kind of the gases and everything going on in the respiratory and cardiovascular system. But once again, if you have some form of neuropathy, it could affect one system or the other. If it does that, you might get to a point where you're exercising, you're breathing harder, nothing's happening, your heart rate's not going up. I mean, you know, normally, if you're exercising and your heart rate doesn't go up rapidly, that means you are in your physiological prime. Your muscles and everything are working at optimal levels. But for the majority of us, once we exercise, our heart rate should be going up, our blood pressure should be going up, and our respiratory rate should be going up. And those typically work hand in hand. On occasion, you'll see one or the other of those not increasing appropriately. So, on occasion, you see people who are exercising, and this isn't necessarily an autonomic failure, but if one of those isn't going up appropriately or changing appropriately, typically it's on the upswing. Somebody will have their heart rate go up and their respiration's not going up, or their blood pressure's not going up to match, and they'll pass out. You know, and it's like, whoa. And you know, when you're exercising on occasion, you start to feel that sometimes. Is that all of a sudden you become lightheaded and dizzy. Well, that can be entirely normal. You know, we're not talking about all of this is not all pathological. On occasion, one system is a little more sluggish than the other. So, yeah. So there's a lot that can happen as a result of autonomic neuropathy. Most of the time, if it's related to diabetes, the neuropathy will involve loss of blood flow to some nerve, either a part of the cord, a part of the brain. If it's the cord or the brain, you're probably talking about affecting the pathway itself. It can be peripheral, in which case you're affecting nerves. You know, nerves, just like everything else, living tissue, requires blood flow. Cool? Yes?
So it's only the sweating abnormalities that are affected by sympathetic, and the rest is like both sympathetic and parasympathetic?
Both?